Hey guys, this is Luca, the bass player from Moondahlia, and today I'm going to be answering, along with Nayo, some questions for the Indie Planet.
Hey, what's up? My name is Niall and I play turntables. And today we're sitting down with the Indie Planet to talk about our music, the inspiration behind us, and who we are as a band.
So, how would I introduce Moondahlia to someone that listens to it for the first time? I would probably stick to the genre that we have agreed upon with Nayo, which is like alternate pop, um, electro alternate pop. Essentially, is what we do. Because in terms of like someone listening to it for the first time, there's a lot of elements that collide within Moondahlia. If you like, Four on the Floor, there's going to be tracks for you. If you like things that are a bit more laid back, there's going to be tracks for you. I would even dare say, with some of the tracks on our first EP, if you like prog rock or prog metal, there might be some influences that you may like a song like Figure Eight is definitely more in the repertoire of something that's a bit more along the lines of prog than it is along the lines of like a typical electronic track, so there's that. Also, if you like if you like bass heavy songs, as in like songs in which like the bass is very prominent, yeah, definitely, like if you're a bass head, you're probably you may actually like some of the things that I compose on there, hopefully.
Yeah, so the way I would introduce Moondahlia to someone who's never heard us before is, yeah, an instrumental pop band or an instrumental indie pop band. And when I say instrumental, I mean that, we're intentionally instrumental. We don't have vocals in the music. Our music is written in a way that doesn't leave a lot of space for vocals. Luca and I both wanted to create a project where we could bring our strengths to the table, and neither of us are strong vocalists. As far as indie and indie pop goes, well, obviously we're indie because we are independent. We don't have any management, no representation, no label, none of that. Everything we do is very much DIY. And pop because, well, we try to structure our songs and pop structure. Pop sensibilities are very important to us. And I think it helps us stand out from other instrumental projects. We make sure that every song has an intro, a verse, a chorus, a bridge, an outro. We try to follow pop structure.
I feel our music has a dreamy vibe to it. The instrumentals that Nayo composes, all of the different texturing and layers that he does, bring a very dreamy vibe, floaty vibe to what we do. But the bass that I compose is usually very grounded, very organic. Um, you know, it is you can hear all the imperfections of the bass as well in there, which is something that we really wanted, that I insisted that we do. But um, essentially, in terms of the final songs themselves, I find that they have quite a dreamy and floaty vibe to them. But there's also always part of the beat that is going to ground this back into reality, and the bass as well contributes to that.
Yeah, so to tack on to what Luca was saying, I think that for me personally, I would describe the sound that he and I have as melancholic music you can shake your hips to. So yeah, we try to have a bit of melancholia in it, which leads itself very nice to the cinematic textures and cinematic soundscapes. But at the same time, having a pop structure and having something that feels danceable, or at the very least, something that you can sway your hips to, is very important to the both of us. Personally, for me, when starting a new song, one of the first things that comes to mind is perhaps the feeling that I want to invoke, and maybe the environment in which I felt that feeling. For example, perhaps I was reminiscing about, my first kiss as an adolescent, but maybe I'm sitting in a grassy field. So I, you know what I mean? Like that specific feeling of reminiscing about your past, but like in a tranquil environment. And how does that make you feel? Does it make you feel melancholic and nostalgic, or does it make you feel optimistic for the future? And then once we kind of narrow down those thoughts, then we go into deciding what musical key would probably help us convey that emotion, or convey that feeling, or convey that sentiment. And we're fans of minor keys. I think we might have one song and a major, but I think, with Luca being French and me being, from Florida in America, I think both of us just kind of gravitate towards that kind of like melancholic sound. You know, for me, it's very like Southern Gothic in a sense, and also like, French film noir. But yeah, definitely it is the idea of the song, but the idea of the song is formulated by thinking of what kind of emotions and feelings we want to convey.
For me, when I start a track, what comes first is I usually listen to the instrumentals that Nayo sends me. I would say like a good 5, 10 times before I start actually writing anything, just because I really want to get the vibe that he tried to go for. Sometimes Nayo is going to give me a description of what place he came from when composing an instrumental, and I will usually try and come from that angle. Just like, for example, if he tells me like, oh, I wanted to go for something that was a bit more dreamy on this, I'd see like, oh, should I make the bass a bit more laid back, or are there funky parts that I can put in there? So really, I go with like a feeling. I don't really come with like a preconstructed idea of like, oh, this I want to do a funk song, so let's do a funk. It usually comes from a feeling. And we just go with that, and if it sticks, it sticks. If it doesn't stick, then I get back to the drawing board. But usually I will stick to the feeling and just like orient my bass lines in a different fashion around the feeling that I had initially.
Yeah, definitely. For me personally, I know that on this upcoming album, that we tried to envision each song as being a scene in an overarching story. And of course, as you're thinking of the scene and as you're thinking of the story, you're imagining the visuals like, okay, this is what this person is thinking right now, or this is what this person is feeling right now. And I think when it comes to our overall release output, I think that while we have a very, very tight DIY shoestring budget, we still try to utilize and incorporate visuals into what we put out, whether it be the performance videos, whether it be the short films that come along with each EP. Yeah, visuals are very important. If we had more backing, if we had more money, we'd probably invest more money in proper narrative-driven music videos. We'd have more production in our performance videos. We'd have, maybe we could afford to hire more of our friends and artists from all over the place to help us create our album covers or EP covers, things of that nature. We might even have, different visualizers. Just utilize as many visuals as we can. In fact, if we were artists in the late 1990s, early 2000s, we'd probably work with directors such as Hype Williams and Dave Meyers. So yeah, visuals are important, not just to our sound, but also to our overall aesthetic as a band.
Do I see scenes, or rather, do I imagine scenes and visuals when I make music? Depends on the tracks. Sometimes yes. Sometimes a track like Figure 8, for example, when I composed it, I had visuals of a bustling city intertwined with visuals and scenes of quiet nature. Dreams in a Valley, when we composed that one, I had very psychedelic visuals in mind, like something that you'd see on shrooms, essentially, with distorted colors and distorted, distorted features and stuff like that. But sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just go purely with feel and like purely audio feel. I don't always go with visuals, but sometimes they do happen by coincidence, yes, or sometimes they do guide how I compose the bass, yes. Feel really like cityscapes and nature based landscapes inspire us a lot. I will say there's also a dimension of like romantic dynamics and romantic relationships and situationships did inspire some of the tracks that we have composed so far, and for our upcoming next album. there definitely is going to be a dimension of romanticism in there, and these are some of the things that inspire us. Um, for me, when I write bass on some of the tracks, like I do try to capture, like if there's a feeling of melancholy or a feeling of these sorts of feelings, I try to capture them with what I compose on the bass, melodically speaking as well.
Yeah, to tack on to what Luca said, we do have a variety of influences. And I think that, to talk about media first, for example, with this album that we're working on right now, yeah, for me, I was inspired by the feelings of nostalgia and longing and like a desire to be with someone. And specifically, I turned to media that I felt represented those in a way that would inspire me, whether it be watching all the Bridgerton seasons or watching the like shoujo anime, Escaflowne, things like that. Now, obviously, that might change depending on what it is that I want to feel and what it is that I want to write. If I want to write something inspiring or optimistic, it might be a reality show in which the contestants win a life-changing sum of money or something like that. But yeah, places, that's a really good question. Yeah, for me, again, we live in Tokyo, and you kind of have all of these different aesthetics in different locations, whether it be like the hustle and bustle of like downtown Shibuya or Shinjuku, for example, or kind of like the laid back urban landscape of like Ebisu or Ebisu Garden Place, or even more like serene and tranquil environments that are out in the suburbs where we live. So for me right now, specifically, I think that yeah, like Ebisu Garden Place is a place that really inspires me. I was there a couple of weeks ago, but just, reminiscing about all the time I've spent there and just, having conversations with friends or going by myself, celebrating birthdays in my 20s, early in the morning by myself, or, the beach that's kind of, close to where I live now, and just watching the waves come in and out. And the kind of feelings that, that allows me to feel, those places, those definitely do inspire me when it comes time to like search my feelings for things that I want to convey via a particular song or via a particular project or via a particular visual. Yeah, working as a duo impacts our creative process by nature of there only being two of us. And it's easier to kind of divvy up roles and bounce ideas off of each other if there's only two of you. In the past, we thought about having a third member, whether it be a keyboard player or a guitarist. But, for whatever reason, it ended up just being the two of us. And yeah, it's great. Yeah, usually with the way a song starts off is that like I'll come up with the drum pattern and the drum beat that way, so we can kind of set the structure of the song, and then either Luca and I will probably come up with the main melody. And then once that part is done, then I work on the pads, I work on the ear candy, the samples, and then Luca works on the bass to tie everything together. And there's only two of us, so I think having that that symbiosis really helps us to kind of crystallize the sound that we want for the project that we're working on, and it makes things more efficient because there's only two of us. So yeah, and for any band, any project, you have to have a bond with whomever you're working with. And I think it's easier to form a deeper, more meaningful bond where there's only two of you. So yeah.
Well, we talk a lot with Nayo. Like I send an obnoxious amount of voice messages, and he sends me also quite a lot of inspiration. It could be just like, hey, I thought about this, and so we talk a lot. We do also meet, of course, but like we talk a lot over our chat, and sometimes like Nayo is gonna have one of these days in which he's just feeling like composing a lot of different instrumentals that correspond to the things and the ideas that we have talked about, correspond to the textures that we had evoked, correspond to the sound signatures that we had talked about, and then he's going to send that to me. Now, I usually prefer, as a bass player, I usually prefer working with an already grounded composition, essentially. So it may sound lazy, like I usually just have to put the bass on there. That is not exactly the case. It's mostly because I want my bass lines to fit perfectly, or as perfect as can be, onto the track. And that means rhythmically, that means melodically, that means because Moondahlia is a very bass prominent project, I really want to make sure that I have as complete an instrumental as possible before I start actually laying the bass on there, and just making it, just making sure that it fits the tone that we want to go for. And then Nayo is going to come back to me and tell me like, hey, this bass line, I don't really know about this one, or like he's going to tell me like, yeah, that's perfect. We work a lot on feedback, and we ping pong essentially recorded tracks between one another. I do also sometimes tell him like, hey, this instrumental, I'm not feeling it, or like this layer that you put on there, maybe a different synth would have a better result. This sample could use a little bit of bit crushing, anything like that. So there's a lot of communication. Now I will say, this being a duo makes this much easier than when I had to work with bands that we were like 4, 5, 6 members, because essentially it just narrows down how much we're going to have to change to have a track that fits both of our visions instead of a track that fits everyone's vision. It also means that it is much easier to compromise on an item, because essentially we just have the two of us to listen to, instead of having another person coming in that we need to also pay attention to, give him room, and so on and so forth. So it really works in our favor to work as a duo. It streamlines the process tremendously, but it also means that we need to have rock solid communication, because there's only the two of us. So if one person in the duo isn't really happy with a track, that's 50% of the band that's not really happy with a track.
Oh, that's a great question. I think I think we would like people to hopefully feel a sense of calm nostalgia, but also melancholia that leads to optimism. With that being said, like, yeah, we write most of our music in minor keys. We like to make it melancholic. We can kind of dance to it, and hopefully that melancholia leads to the listener feeling like, oh, I've had melancholy times before in the past, and I've overcome them. So this reminds me of, maybe a part of my childhood, a part of my past that, maybe I overcame, and look at me now. So I definitely want people to feel like warm, nostalgic melancholia that inspires them to just keep on going.
When it comes to what I hope people feel when they listen to Moondahlia, I hope that they feel what we wanted to convey through the track, and essentially that they get the point of like the specific like the songs that we're composing. So like a piece that is more melancholic, I do hope that people feel that melancholy, that we managed to drive the feeling forward, that we managed to get the point across. When the mood is more to something that's dancey, we do hope that people they can groove, and while they listen to what they while they do what they do, that while they listen to the track, like that they groove a little bit to it. So for me, it's not really a matter of like whether they like the tracks or not. Like, what's important to me is that people get the point, that they're not left indifferent, that they engage with the song, even if they don't like it, or engaging with the material for me is extremely important. When it comes to give a piece of advice to an independent artist to find their sound, try and error. You're gonna do awesome stuff, you're gonna do garbage, you're gonna do both. I've done both. I've been doing both for years now. Sometimes I do things that I'm really proud of. I've done projects that I'm really not proud of, and I'd rather they be buried, But what doesn't change in there is that I always put myself forward. What I displayed in my sound, in my music, in anything that I contributed to was my personality, was my bass playing, was my sound, how I, really, it took me years to really craft my sound, craft my bass identity in that sense. And even if it's like in prog metal, if it is in a post-rock project, if it is with Moondahlia, anything like that, I always stayed as true as I could to how I wanted to put myself forward as a bass player, in any project, and really like not shy away from my identity. And I think this is really important, especially as an indie artist, when you want to find yourself, because essentially everyone and their mother is going to tell you that they know your sound and they know what you should be better than you do, and that's not true. It's not to say that you should absolutely never compromise, because sometimes people are going to give you like some really good feedback, and you should be listening. But while you listen to that, just ask yourself, is this impeding on my identity, and is this are these changes that I'm just suggested to do these make me feel uncomfortable? If that's the case, it is probably best that you stick true to yourself. But if you feel that you are receiving constructive feedback and you can implement it, this is also going to contribute to making your own sound, to finding your identity and finding what really makes you happy when you compose music, when you're on stage, anything like that. But again, you are the one person that understands your identity and what you want to do best. Listen to yourself.
I think if I could give one piece of advice to indie artists who are looking to create their own sound, would be, don't be afraid to release your own stuff if it doesn't match the sound that your main project has. For example, like any band, is going to have a sound that crystallizes between the members. It's inevitable. And any creative person is going to have time where they create something that doesn't necessarily match that sound. Don't be afraid to maybe make a little EP or whatever of your own recordings that don't match the sound of your band, so you have a place to release that, because not everything is going to be for one thing. And when it comes to finding the sound of your band, don't be afraid to bond with your bandmates. Being in a band is almost like being in like a marriage or having siblings, or a different kind of friendship. I think some people look at it only as a job, but if you want to create actual art, you have to actually like the people you're with. You have to respect their tastes and respect their ideas and respect their lived history. Like, it's important to, talk about anything and everything under the sun with your bandmates and just bond as people, because it builds a sense of trust that enables everyone involved to feel what's the word I'm looking for? To feel enabled or empowered enough to bring all of their creative ideas to the table. Because even though you might crystallize a sound, that sound will probably change from project to project, release to release. And you need to have everyone on the same page, trust-wise, to reach the next evolution of their sound together.
Hey guys, I'm super happy that you got to discover our music. It's really super cool. I've been playing bass and playing in bands for the past 18 years now, and it's always been a thrill having what I create be on display, get feedback for it. Some people like it, some people don't like it, some people just don't really care for it, but when I get people engaged with what I do, no matter the manner, it's always been super thrilling for me. And so I'm beyond happy that you're essentially listening to a little bit of our music. I really hope that you do like it. If you come across Tokyo, definitely. If we have a show, you're more than welcome to show up. And yeah, I'm just really happy that you're dedicating some time to listening to our ramblings, Niles and I.
Yeah, I guess our message is, to tack on to what Luca said. Yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for finding us. Please definitely do what you can to share our music with people who you think might like it. If you like what we're doing, definitely please check us out on YouTube, Moondahlia. Please like and subscribe. I think right now in this current landscape of, all these different factors, whether it be AI or streaming kind of disrupting the music industry, I think, if you could show us some love and support on our YouTube, that means the world to us, and that really helps us out the most, probably, because that means you guys are engaging with our music, you're engaging with our visuals, you're engaging with whatever other content we put up on YouTube. And yeah, I think as an indie musician, I love YouTube the most for indie music release. Subscribe to our Instagram. We have a TikTok. We should be more active on that, but there's so many things, and we can only do so many things. But yeah, definitely share with people who you think would enjoy it, and please like and subscribe to our YouTube. And yeah, check us out. Thank you.